the recognized symbol of excellence in sports entertainment.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Tyler Vance Rants. I am your host, Tyler Vance himself, and you're not. It is December 22nd, 1984. Last week, Cyndi Lauper touted herself as an undefeated pro wrestling manager, which is a blatant lie to her easily influenced fans. James J. Dillon issued a bounty on the heads of Avalanche Buzz Tyler, the American Dream Dusty Rhodes, the Raging Bull Manny Fernandez, Dick Slater, and Ricky Steamboat, who presumably cried himself to sleep every single night since hearing the news. The hillbilly that's been attending every single World Wrestling Federation show over the past couple of months had his identity revealed to Rowdy Roddy Piper on Piper's Pit, where it was identified that Big Jim was from Kentucky, where they breed 'em big and dumb. Since we're talking about the WWF, we're going to tune into their flagship show, Championship Wrestling, first this week, where the iconic video that I placed at the beginning of my episode preceded this episode of Championship Wrestling. As always, Vince McMahon and the living legend Bruno Sammartino are on commentary, where first we don't get into a match, rather we hear from Captain Lou Albano, who has had a change of heart thanks to the Christmas season.
Twas the night before Christmas, not a beer in the house. My girl walked out, and I felt like a louse, with reruns of Piper's Pit dancing in my head. It was like a nightmare, when what to my bloodshot eyes should appear but a miniature sled and 8 tiny reindeer. I ran back in the house from the spot where I fell. My rubber band snapped as I let out a yell. He said, "Lou Albano, you haven't been good each day of the year like you know that you should." So I said, "Wait a minute, are you calling me fat? That's muscle, you jerk. I can knock you flat." "You got me wrong, Santa. Don't make that mistake. That Rowdy Piper always makes." "I was wrong, Lou Albano," he said with a smile. "So instead of giving you pieces of coal, I've decided you're a good boy on the whole. Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night."
Ugh, what the hell were those? Okay, allow me to unwrap this very unwanted gift from Captain Lou Albano. Even though he read it off as a storybook to confuse the masses on his own inability to admit any wrongdoing on his part, Captain Lou Albano thinly revealed through confused words that he is ready to turn over a new leaf on life. He also took several veiled shots at Rowdy Roddy Piper and his behavior towards Cyndi Lauper recently, all in an effort to be put on Santa Claus's nice list. First making peace with the Wild Samoans and the Tonga Kid at the wedding of Paul Vachon, and now this? Captain Albano, Bubby, what's going on? David Sammartino takes on Terry Manton following the rather disappointing news from Captain Lou Albano. Sammartino controls the early parts of the match following several takedowns on Manton. However, Manton fights back by laying into the living legend's son in the corner. As David Sammartino is subsequently Irish whipped into the opposite corner, he uses the opportunity to absolutely unload his own flurry of punches on Terry Manton, before a short while later a power slam allows Sammartino to walk away with the 3 count. Next up, the World Wrestling Federation update, which is always hosted by Lord Awful Alfred Hayes. Thank you, Hulk Hogan, because that will never get old. Chooses to focus on the Junkyard Dog this week, where the Lord states that
is probably the most charismatic wrestler in the world today.
If what you mean by charismatic, you mean insane, then you're absolutely right. The guy acts like a mongrel, biting his opponents and then scurrying around on all fours like some kind of freak. That's one dog that needs to be put down. Dr. D. David Schultz takes on Joe Mirto one-on-one next. Dr. Schultz starts the match off by showing an amazing gesture of good sportsmanship, offering his hand to Mirto and shaking it before going to town and beating Joe down in the corner. A reverse elbow from the Doctor follows, which sends Joe Mirto down hard. As Dr. D. David Schultz goes on to continue dissecting his opponent, he finishes up his surgery with a body slam. This opens the way for the Good Doctor to head up to the second rope, where he hits not one, but two diving elbows to walk away with a very impressive win. As if we don't get enough propaganda from the various amount of Cyndi Lauper supporters all throughout the World Wrestling Federation, we're again shown more, as at least this time, Lauper has the dignity to do her job and sing.
We'll be your friends. We'll stick with you till the end.
People really call that music? Terry Gibbs and Rusty Humpty Dumpty Brooks team up to face the cousin team of Jimmy Superfly Snuka and the Tonga Kid in tag team action next. Gibbs starts the effort off for his team by missing a haymaker before proceeding to be hit by a chop from the Tonga Kid and then suffers a cross body, which leads to a near fall. Terry Gibbs attempts to fight back from this by slamming the Kid's head into a corner turnbuckle. However, the Kid from Tonga then simply dances in response. Oh, it's because the cousins of Jimmy Snuka and the Tonga Kid have incredibly thick skulls. Gibbs gets backdropped, which leads to him desperately tagging in Rusty Brooks. The Tonga Kid immediately tries to shoulder block Brooks, but it's ineffective. Remember, thick skull. So, the Tonga Kid puts that thick skull to good use by hitting Rusty Brooks in the head not once, but twice. That could cause permanent brain damage. It's no surprise that after a quick tag from the Tonga Kid, Jimmy Superfly Snuka's splash is enough to put the dazed Rusty Brooks down for the 3 count. Piper's Pit immediately follows the stink of Jimmy Snuka and the Tonga Kid's win to cleanse the air with the quality content of Bobby the Brain Heenan and a returning Playboy Buddy Rose.
Did you see the hillbilly that came on? The one that held the microphone like this? Had 9 months to come up with a name, and they come up with Big Jim.
Some of you might be asking, who's Playboy Buddy Rose and why should I care? Well, I'm glad that you asked. Rose got his start in professional wrestling back in the early 1970s with the American Wrestling Association, before quickly moving on to the National Wrestling Alliance. Playboy was able to gain accolade after accolade, accomplishment after accomplishment in both promotions before he was brought on by the World Wrestling Federation initially in 1982. From 82 to 83, Playboy Buddy Rose was often in contention for the WWF World Heavyweight Championship, having faced off against then-champion Bob Backlund on August 30th of 1982. Since then, Buddy Rose has competed in both New Japan Pro Wrestling as well as Pacific Northwest Wrestling before finally returning to the World Wrestling Federation tonight. I don't know about you, but I'm impressed. And especially since Playboy Buddy Rose comes with both high praise and confidence from Bobby the Brain Heenan and Rowdy Roddy Piper, I too will choose to place my confidence in Buddy Rose.
I like to see Big Jim or any of you people do that. One-handed, all right. I like to. Beautiful. I could have done 100 of.
Someone who should take physique advice from Playboy Buddy Rose is Mr. USA, Tony Atlas, who faces off against Gino Carabello one-on-one next. Brutus Beefcake makes an almost immediate appearance, circling the ring, which causes confusion between both participants. He then disappears into the ether as, despite the flamboyancy at ringside, Mr. USA is able to take it to Carabello. Sending Gino spiraling with a single punch, Mr. USA then employs a back suplex and a bridge to walk away with an easy 3 count. Oh Hawaii, how I long to be with you! At least, until then, I can live vicariously through Don Muraco.
Eat your hearts out, all you smog-sucking landlubbers.
The main event of the Championship Wrestling Before Christmas sees Jose Luis Rivera and Jim Powers team up to face off against the true giant of the WWF.
Big John Studd. The giant Studd!
Get it right, Finkel, you goof, and Ken Patera, who are both riding that high from having cut Andre the Giant down to size a couple of weeks ago.
Hulk Hogan! Oh my goodness!
What the hell is this? WWF Champion Hulk Hogan makes his way down to the ringside area only to simply yell at Bobby the Brain Heenan, who is guilty of simply accompanying his clients, Stud and Patera, down to the ring, who they too themselves receive an earful from the champion. What's Hogan's problem? Thankfully, that disgrace of a WWF champion shows himself the door before he would have been subject to fines and possibly even a suspension for interfering in a match that he had no business being a part of. For once, Hulk Hogan made the smart decision. As the bell rings, Powers immediately tries to make a name for himself and become $15,000 richer by attempting to slam Big John Studd, but he's simply easily rebuffed by the true giant of the WWF. Jim Powers then becomes a victim to the superior teamwork of both Studd and Ken Patera. A delayed suplex leads to Ken Patera mocking the animals in the crowd before tagging in Big John Studd, who simply drops an elbow down onto Jim Powers to come away with the win. That goof in red and yellow returns to the ring and attacks the victors for absolutely no reason once the match is concluded. But that moron quickly realizes that the consequences to his idiotic actions can sometimes be incredibly painful. Heenan himself decides that he's going to cut off that ridiculous haircut that Hulk Hogan wears. But before that can happen, that idiot, that imbecile, Big Jim from Kentucky, oh how I hate him, jumps the railing and then dishes out whatever he seems to perceive as justified justice. You are not a wrestler. You turned that opportunity down last week when you subsequently turned Rowdy Roddy Piper down, who offered you a golden ticket, which was a rare example of Rowdy Roddy Piper not being able to differentiate between talent and trash. You should be thrown in jail for Christmas, and then maybe you'll learn how to be civilized.
Let's hear it for Big Jim, huh? Where are you?
How dare you, Vince McMahon? You know what? Just for that, I'm going to be tuning into your competitor, the National Wrestling Alliance, and its flagship show, Worldwide Wrestling, where we'll see who the true symbol of excellence in professional wrestling is. Tag team action immediately starts Worldwide Wrestling as David Crockett and Tony Schiavone call the action between the Road Warriors, Animal and Hawk, taking on the team of Dale Veasy and Sam Houston, who are brawled to the outside of the ring as soon as the bell rings. Once back inside the squared circle, Sam Houston proceeds to be brutalized by both Animal and Hawk, while their manager, Precious Paul Ellering, looks on proudly. Animal even does Houston a favor, tossing him into his own corner where he can get a free tag to Dale Veasy, who fares no better than his partner at the hands of the Road Warriors. After suffering several devastating power moves, Veasy has no choice but to once more tag in Sam Houston. A nasty backbreaker precedes Sam Houston being tossed neck first onto the ring ropes. Moments later, Sam Houston is put down for the 3 count following a brutal clothesline from Animal. In a restaurant, because why not, Tony Schiavone has a word with 2 longtime associates and friends in James J. Dillon and Paul Jones. Schiavone states fact when he states that Paul Jones had a very successful 1984, and Mr. Jones agrees but states that 1985 is going to be an even better year.
We're going to make it a big year for the fans.
I can't wait. Dillon is similarly praised by Schiavone, who goes on to state that the Long Riders, both Cowboy Ron Bass and Black Bart, had tremendous success under the tutelage of James J. Dillon once coming to Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling.
A great personal friend, and Paul, you're just a genius is what you are. There's a few people around here green with envy, but we're going to handle them in 1985, aren't we, Paul?
You bet.
James J. Dillon and Paul Jones, these symbols of excellence when it comes to management in professional wrestling. Cyndi Lauper, take notes. While Tony Schiavone is giving credit where credit is due, he does have a question for James J. Dillon.
Now the question is, how long will that success last?
Look, Anthony, James J. Dillon is the catalyst that makes things happen, okay? Despite the fact that both the American Dream Dusty Rhodes and Dillon himself have constantly been in conflict with one another throughout their entire time throughout various promotions sharing employment, James J. Dillon has only gotten wiser while Dusty Rhodes has only gotten dumber. They can't coexist. Thus why Mr. Dillon has placed a bounty on the heads of the American Dream and his criminal accomplices. There is not room for both of them in this promotion. Dusty Rhodes has to go.
Because as a combination, we're unbeatable.
Speaking of the NWA Mid-Atlantic Tag Team Champions, the Long Riders, they're in tag team action next as they face off against Keith Larsen and Bret Hart in a non-title match. Hart must be addicted to being brutalized by both the NWA Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Champion Cowboy Ron Bass and his partner Black Bart, considering Hart continues to sign contracts to be brutalized by them. Bart continues his newly found vicious streak, biting Bret Hart before leading into a body slam elbow drop combination. Bret Hart then manages to get a tag to the brother of Don Kernodle, Keith Larsen, who goes on to be disposed of outside of the ring before being brought back in the hard way with a suplex from Black Bart. A double clothesline from both Bass and Bart greet Bret Hart on his re-entry into the match, which is enough to secure victory for James J. Dillon's clients. Half of the NWA World Tag Team Champions, the American Dream Dusty Rhodes, speaks to Tony Schiavone next in the restaurant, and Rhodes states that 1984 has been one of the most fortuitous of his entire career.
1984 was a big year for Dusty Rhodes.
How so, Dusty? Or is this just another one of your grand delusions? While regaling us of the heavily propagandized version of how he and the raging loser Manny Fernandez won the NWA World Tag Team Championships in a steel cage against then partners Don Kernodle and Ivan Koloff, as Don Kernodle himself then joins the conversation. I covered that initial win on episode 44 of my series, which I'll link down below for your viewing pleasure and so you can get the facts behind the win. Speaking of facts, Don Kernodle elevates himself from the pride of the Carolinas to
the pride of the USA,
and then goes on to say that he can finally walk around without a neck brace. Good, because the sooner that he is able to compete in the ring, the sooner he can suffer another humiliating beating at the hands of Ivan and Nikita Koloff. The Shame of the USA states that it was the attack itself from the Russian Bear and his nephew the Russian Nightmare which truly opened Kernodle's eyes to the error of his ways.
Just keep your eyes on Don Kernodle because the pride of the USA is back and he's on the right track.
Really, Don? Did it teach you to also read contracts before you blindly sign them too? Dusty Rhodes then takes an opportunity to address the recently arrived Magnum TA in Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, going on to state that when he worked with TA in other promotions, Dusty Rhodes was always impressed and continues to be to this day.
A handsome man, because I've been with him and been lucky enough to have been with him on certain dates.
As long as he stays away from Rhodes, Magnum TA can accomplish anything. One thing I do agree with the American Dream on is the point that he makes against people who make fun of professional wrestling itself, its athletes, as well as us, the fans.
The wrestling fans outnumber the non-wrestling fans. It is the greatest sport in the world. And Richard Petty, if you don't like it, it's too bad. Jack Nicklaus, you don't like it, it's too bad. Reggie Jackson, you don't like it, it's too bad.
The NWA World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy, Ric Flair, next speaks to Tony Schiavone and states that being able to main event the second Starrcade this November was an absolute honor, where he defeated Tony Schiavone's previous guest, the American Dream Dusty Rhodes, to not only retain the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, but walk away $1 million richer. Woo! Going into 1985, the Nature Boy vows to constantly defend his championship across the entire National Wrestling Alliance against the best that promotion has to offer. two of the very best of the entire National Wrestling Alliance in the NWA United States Heavyweight Champion Chief Wahoo McDaniel and the NWA Television Champion Tully Blanchard take on the team of Jim Horton and Randy Barber in tag team action next. It's been too long since we've seen the awesome twosome of Chief McDaniel and Blanchard team together. What a treat! Tully Blanchard tries to shake the hand of Jim Horton, but's waved off by that idiot in response. Horton immediately reverses an Irish whip from Tully Blanchard as the match officially gets underway and headbutts the NWA Television Champion in the gut, but seemingly has knocked himself out in the process because he ain't getting up. When he regains consciousness, Horton is able to tag in a very reluctant Randy Barber, who immediately suffers an atomic drop from Chief Wahoo McDaniel, also tagged in. Barber says, "Screw that," and rushes back to his corner to tag Jim Horton back in. Tully Blanchard is tagged in, and then Jim Horton hesitantly tries to attack the NWA Television Champion. But he's easily overcome by Tully Blanchard's slingshot suplex, being put down for the pin. And with that, Worldwide Wrestling and the week come to an end. 1985 is truly set to be an extravaganza of a year in professional wrestling. And speaking to you honestly, having gone through an entire year now of professional wrestling coverage, I understood one fundamental fact. I could never guess what was going to come next. There's still 1 week to go before we transition to 1985. What could possibly happen? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Tyler Vance Rants. It is the season of giving, so why don't you give the video a like, give the bell a ring, and give the channel a subscribe. You can also gift me a follow on social media. That's all for now. I'll see you next week. So long, and Merry Christmas. Tully Blanchard tries to shake the hand of Jim Horton in a gesture of good Samaritism. That's not a word.